Hello, welcome again to DieCastRestos. It's Jason here with the 66A Citroën D.S 19. This model was in the range from 1959 until 1962. It's thought that it was introduced in order to improve Lesney's European appeal, being the first French car in the range. First off, you can see that the front plastic wheel has split entirely in half, but somehow remains on the axle. And most evidently, it's been painted a horrible kind of off-white duck egg almost colour. A lot of the details are obscured by this thick layer of paint. It may have even been white originally, but the yellow is sort of coming through the paint underneath in certain places. This model will need a lot of work in order to try and define some of those features, such as the doors, the door handles, and the badges as well. Quite a nice casting, this one. Very much representative of the early models in the A series. Strangely, the model number has been printed onto a small plate and been placed next to the rear rivet. Base is in fairly good working order. I do have two rivets to remove for this one. So first up, I'll remove those using a 4mm drill bit. Once both of those have been removed, I can lever the base off. It's become stuck down with some paint. Just using my dental tool, and there we have it. I noticed that the rear axle does not have the wheels held on in any way at all, mainly I suppose because they are obscured by the bodywork when it's in place, but there was no crimping or rounded edges to the axle to prevent the wheels from falling off. And as you can see, the front one, as it was split, just unscrews off of the axle, so I didn't need to grind any of these off today. Here are the 8 main components to the model. Then I drill out the post with the 1.5mm drill bit, and while I've got my drill out, I'll just buff up those axles. After lubricating the posts, I can use a screw tap to thread the posts. Now for some slow-mo paint removal. As per usual, give it a nice thick coating. And you can see the original yellow paintwork in here. While I was letting the paint stripper do its thing, I decided to clean up those wheels that I had remaining. I did have a spare grey plastic wheel left over from restoration where the model literally crumbled. So I've got some spare ones going, so I've used that for this one. And then I scrape off some of the excess duck egg blue kind of paint that was left on some of the wheels. Now, after leaving the model to soak for a while, the horrible blue paint had been removed from the bodywork, but the original paint hadn't really budged, especially on the roof. It seemed to have come off a bit on the sides and the front, but the roof and the rear boot lids didn't really seem to do much too. So I left it overnight, and as you can see, it's come off quite easily here. Just a bit of agitation from the brush. And here's the beautiful casting with a few specks of paint left. It came in two different shades of yellow. There was a pale yellow and a slightly darker, more orangey yellow. I think this one was, I'd assume, the slightly darker yellow. Doesn't look very pale to me, at least anyway. Now just a bit on the Citroën DS, or DS as it's pronounced in French. DS means goddess, so it's a bit of a pun on that. It was introduced in 1955 and had a 20-year lifespan. It had a couple of facelifts during that time. Eventually the lights were enclosed in glass, and so it was more aerodynamic. The car then featured the revolutionary directional headlights. Here I'm using my wire brush tool in my rotary tool to buff up the model after all of that paint had been removed, as you'd seen in the previous scenes. I'll speed it up a bit here. Bit of an arduous process, but I'm tempted one day to do a bit of a custom and have a polished chrome model, because I'd like to take it a little bit further. But not for this one. This is the first time I've got my hands on one of these 66As, and I've been looking forward to restoring it. So once that's done, I've given them a decent buff over prior to applying the primer. Now I'm going to be using the standard Tamiya fine primer. And here I was hoping that the details would stand out across the model. It seemed to do so. The front end looks pretty decent. Sides, okay. I am a bit worried when it comes to the paint layer that they might not be that defined around the doors. So I'll apply some of that primer to the base. That's come up quite nicely. And I'll pop some of the TS14 black over that to take it back to its original form. Then I move on to the colour. It is the Tamiya TS47 Chrome Yellow, the same as which I'd used in the 42A Evening News Van video, and also for the 37B Carrier Bantam Coca-Cola truck. Seems to have applied in quite a thick layer. Hopefully it dries out okay. It does tend to go on the older models with their fine details a lot more thick. And I was just concerned about concealing the badge. Here I tap the rear axle back in place just to secure it. And then using my needle nose pliers I tried to clamp down the crimp on the front axle. Then I shine up the ends of the axles using a silver paint pen. And likewise with the silver pen, I can then fill in the details with a fine paintbrush. The headlights go in, the front grille goes back in. And then it's time to screw it all back together. Ready for the grand reveal. So here we are then, this is what we started off with. The poorly painted and wheel damaged Citroën D.S 19. Thick layer of unusually coloured paint obscuring some of the details. These are my favourite models to restore because I love taking them back to the bare bones after they've had all of this horrible paint applied to them, quite crudely more often than not. This is definitely a model that deserved another opportunity to show off all of those nice curves, all those little details. And now for the crossfade transition. It's back to its original yellow shade. As I'd already used that paint and I still had some left over in my rattle can, I decided to go for the same shade as I'd used for the other two models as I mentioned earlier. I thought this model would stand out more in a brighter, more brash yellow, but I am very tempted to go and do a custom one of these with more of the detail filled in, not as originally intended perhaps, a bit later on once I get my hands on another one. And so far these have been like hen's teeth, quite frankly. I don't know why, I just haven't really come across that many of them for sale. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode today. Thank you very much for watching once again. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you again for the next one. Bye for now.